The job of a police officer is never easy. Putting yourself at risk to maintain order and protect your town or city is a huge honor and responsibility. As such, they can be asked to carry out some truly horrific tasks. Be warned, this video is horrifying. And if you're not one for the very worst the world has to throw at you, best click away now. But without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Number 1. We were called to an apartment, which was a reputed local drug den. A female we knew called and said that the male renter had been assaulted and she had ran. We got there and the door was bolted shut. I kicked the door over and over again, and it would not open. What I found out later is that the dope team had done a search warrant on the apartment a couple of weeks ago, and afterwards the tenants had reinforced the door jamb with a metal plate. It took me a total of 22 times kicking the door before I broke the deadbolt in half, which flew across the room and hit the wall. We made entry, guns drawn, and started clearing the apartment. This place was the kind of spooky I'd seen in places where a lot of meth is done. It was dark. There were swastikas, 666, upside down pentagrams, etc., painted all over the wall. Pictures of faces hung off the wall, with the eyes X'd out, and baby dolls with their eyes scratched out into X's. As we cleared the first room, we started seeing the blood, first on the bed, and then a trail on the floor leading back to the room. The layout was weird. One main room, and then a back room, which was more of a hallway and a bathroom at the end of the hall. We followed the trail of blood down the hall to the bathroom door. In front of the door was the renter's dog, which was shaking uncontrollably and pissing all over the floor, scared out of its mind. As we got closer to the dog, it became very aggressive because it was scared. I made my way around the dog and entered the bathroom, where I found the renter hunched over in the shower, bleeding from his face, holding his cheeks with his hands. He was frantically trying to talk, pleading with us not to hurt his dog. Blood was dripping from his mouth, and I couldn't understand him. Then I saw the extent of what had happened. His jaw had been dislocated on both sides when he was beaten by 2 men with a hammer. It was just hanging there. As he was trying to plead with us, he could only attempt to talk by flicking his blood-covered tongue in the pattern of words, because his jaw didn't work at all. Number 2. This was told to me by my EMT friend. In one of the apartments in a nearby city, the apartment manager went in to investigate a really bad smell in one of the lower units. Apparently, people all around it were complaining. Once he saw what was up, he called the ambulance. So, first responders show up, which included my said EMT friend. And there's this lady sitting on a couch. There's also something squirmy going on down in her underpants area. So they check her out, and in the process remove said undergarments. And out falls a swarm of maggots. Apparently, said individual had a fairly strong substance abuse problem. Some of the needles she poked into her nethers which caused an infection. This led to rotting flesh, which attracted flies, which in turn led to maggots. The worst part, she was not dead, just so drugged up that she basically never noticed that she was literally rotting and falling apart from the waist down. Number 3. My grandfather's cousin had been a coroner for years, and they had to get into a house of a guy who lived alone. It was just him and his dog. The dog had been chained outside at the time that this guy died, and obviously there wasn't anyone around to unchain him afterwards. It had been days in the southern sun, so someone at some point unchains the poor dog before the coroner gets there. They have to hold onto his collar because he is frantic and desperate to get inside of the house. The coroner gets there, they bust the door open, and the dog manages to slip away from the person holding the collar. The dog dashed past everyone and leapt on the body of the dead owner, no doubt to protect him, at which point, apparently, he exploded. You may be wondering why. The bacteria in your gut that makes you fart starts eating your body after you die. They're still making a lot of gas, but now it doesn't have an easy way out. So the body fills with gas, and at the same time the skin is getting thinner and weaker. So the end result is basically a very grisly and foul-smelling flesh balloon, 5 to 6 feet long, and then along comes a dog with sharp scratchy claws, and boom, it was entrail confetti for everyone. Number 4. I spent my first year as a constable in an inner city suburb of Queensland. Now, of the population of the area, something like 40% was reserved for government commissioned housing for rehabilitated criminals and persons released from mental health assessment centres. So there was a share of creepy shit, but to be fair, for the most part, the people who we dealt with were more like cartoon characters than super shady creepy, but they had their moments. One guy that we had just met before decided one afternoon to start destroying shit in the commission setup of units he lived at. He was going crazy, kicking through latticing, throwing pot plants off buildings at passers-by, stealing and collecting people's shoes, smashing car windows and the like. After about 15 minutes of mayhem, he must have ran out of steam and gone back up to his unit. That's where we found him, and he decided to bung on a turn. He would just not stop screaming and bashing his head and face into any surface or object that he could find. Eventually we got a van with a pod and secured him. Then we went back into the house to try and figure out what had happened. The house were like a cluster bomb had gone off. Somehow he had fit 2 coils trolleys inside and was using them as furniture. The whole place stank of rotting food and shit, and on the coffee table, if you can call it that, there were a series of scrawled notes of just expellatives. Again, not massive mental function with this guy, as well as a wooden box. Inside the wooden box were about 100 small clip seal bags. Over half of the bags had a brown granular organic material in them, and the others had clear crystal-like stuff in them. The brown bags were somewhat organised from the smallest to the largest staples. Now, with the type of people we had in the area, we had all sorts of wonderful ways these people got high. We were used to seeing weird shit that people would ingest, so we didn't recognise these bags, but were quite confident that they were a narcotic of some kind. So, of course, we examined the bags and their contents, and there's enough to test if need be. So I go to get one of the bags and empty its contents to see it better. So these samples of brown material, they've got flecks of colour and little tendril-like hairs, not unusual for plant derivatives to have, but I've never seen it before. So I'm looking at it, I'm holding it, talking to my partner that it may be a really coarse hash derivative, or byproduct of production or something else, and how this might potentially explain why the guy went nuts. The dog unit officer who assisted with the arrest comes in. He sees the scene, looks at the coffee table, and looks at the bags, looks at me holding the contents of one in my palm, and straight away goes, "That guy's got golden staph. He's been collecting scabs." This guy had been picking at a golden staph infection on his leg, collecting the scabs, organizing them into smallest to largest, and then eating them. The small yellow crystals, snot and crust from his nose, with the same end goal. I bought shares in Purcell hand sanitizer after that. Number 5. I got dispatched to a call. The daughter had tried to reach her elderly mother and couldn't make contact. For the most part, these usually end badly. We got to the location of the house, and we had received written authorization from the daughter to make forced entry at the front door. We asked the daughter to wait by the squad car and had the fire department spreading the door frame open. Immediately, I noticed the smell and began to search the house. I found her mother in the kitchen, laying on the open door of the oven. Half her face and hair were burnt off, and the oven was still on, cooking her. Apparently, we found out from the daughter that the mother used the oven for heat and had a heart attack and fell on the oven door. Best thing I can say is that it looked like Harvey Dent from the Nolan Batman film. Number 6. I got a call from a woman screaming from an abandoned apartment, saying that she was being tortured and killed. My partner and 4 other officers and I had to search every room and door in what looked like a college dorm. All the doors faced inward, and there was absolutely no way of knowing where the screams were coming from. My partner found the woman covered in her own blood, running out of an apartment. I held the apartment door whilst he ran her down. Scariest call of my life. Turns out she was tripping on PCP and had been cutting herself. There was no way of knowing that until we searched the apartment, and I swear that Michael Myers, Krueger, or Chucky were waiting behind every door in that apartment, just waiting to stab me. It was an awesome time. Number 7. My uncle is a cop and likes to tell the story of the time he showed up to arrest a 15-year-old who skipped school to throw rocks through some cars and steal things inside them. He gets there and knows the kid. They've gotten him a few times before, one time for turning up to school with drugs, and the other time for carrying a knife at school. They knock on the door, and his 18-year-old brother and 17-year-old sister open it. The cops kindly tell them what they want, and the duo then respectfully tells them to piss off. The cops show them that they have the warrant for this kid's arrest, and that they need to open the door. They get told, this time more rudely, to leave. So, getting quite annoyed now, another cop car pulls up and asks what's going on. As they're being uncooperative, they know that they may have to force their way in and break the chain. The 18-year-old shithead says that he has a gun, and about 3 seconds later the door is broken down. The 18-year-old is quickly tasered, and the 17-year-old girl is screaming for her brother to book it. So he jumps out the window and manages to get away for now. The brother is thrown in the cop car, and the 17-year-old very cleverly slaps one of the officers in the face and ends up getting the same free ride and a new pair of bracelets. They then call the property manager to get permission to enter the house and complete the investigation. The second floor reeks. It's the worst smell they've ever smelt. They get upstairs and it just gets worse and worse. They open the door and find a long, rotten body, surrounded by needles and other drug shit. They leave and call it in. Uncle says that later it came out that their grandmother died of an overdose. The mother was in jail for stabbing up some guys, and the kids never reported the grandmother being dead, so that they could keep cashing in her social security checks. She had been sitting there dead in a corner of a room for about a year. Number 8. I was a fresh officer with dreams of being a hero. I get dispatched to a call of a family fight. Not wife or husband, but brother-sister. The female was reporting the male had attacked her. I arrived and located the female and the male. The male I knew from prior contacts. I detained him in handcuffs, then quickly smelled a strong odour of pepper spray. I found out that after the male knocked off the female's weave, she pepper sprayed him. I knew there were different types of pepper spray, like gel, and I'm walking around the house taking photos for my investigation and assessing the property damage. I noticed that in his room, the odour of the pepper spray was extremely strong and made my eyes sting and water instantly, with a decent amount of stinging sensation. The fumes had made it incredibly hard to breathe and left me without the ability to breathe at points, requiring me to leave the room to get fresh air. I then find a brownish gel substance all over the walls in the shape of handprints. I photographed the evidence and determined that it was the pepper gel that the male suspect was wiping off his face onto the wall. I found it odd that it was all over the walls and covered the room. I thought this chick dusted him with the entire can of pepper gel, and after some investigation, I took the male to jail. I responded to the same house several days later for an unrelated medical issue. There were more family members at the house, and the male was still in custody. I was having a conversation with the family as the hero firefighters were saving the day. I inquired if they had fully cleaned up the pepper spray from the male's room, and they gave me a strange look and told me that there was none in there. I told them about the gel that was on the wall, and then I sat there in horror as they explained to me that this man had been, for years, ejaculating on his walls and playing with it, and the gel was in fact the fumes that were released after years of accumulation. My God, was it foul. Number 9. A former officer of the law told this to me years ago. The officer had responded to a parent's call to arrest their son, who they were convinced had relapsed on meth. What had tipped them off was that the son had started blasting both thrash metal and porn on max volume from his bedroom and locked himself inside. Communication with the kid was impossible with the noise. However, the officer's partner had been able to glance into the kid's window and can see that he was sitting motionless in front of his computer. He was shirtless, but otherwise everything seemed rather normal. With permission from the parents, the officer decided to push through the lock. Moans and groans and relentless guitars deafened the ears. The only light illuminating the room was the bluish hue of the computer monitor. The kid's face was a disoriented grin, stretching to his lips' furthest limits. He wasn't shirtless, he was in fact naked and drenched in sweat. In his right hand, cupped like a chalice, were his testicles, which he had ripped off in a flurry of drug-induced self-mutilation. Number 10. I was taking this law class, and my professor brings in a cop to talk about points of law. At one point, the cop shows the class a picture of a man who committed suicide by a gun. "Can you see what colour his eyes are?" he asked. Of course no one can, and after some dumb stares, the cop says, "Blue. One blue this way, the other blue that way." The whole class groans and raises it. The whole class then groans, so I raise my hand and say, "Obviously you have thicker skin about this story than anything we do, but have you ever seen anything that got to you?" The cop then got very serious and told us this story. A local family, 2 brothers, both very young, every Saturday morning, the older brother would get up early and make toast, and both he and his younger brother would sit in front of the TV, munch some toast, and watch Saturday morning cartoons. This one Saturday, the older brother didn't want to get up and make toast, so the younger brother decided to try it for himself. He apparently went to the kitchen and put the bread in the toaster and then pulled the switch down. He didn't notice how close the toaster was to the kitchen window curtains, and to make a long story short, the house caught fire and the parents barely made it out alive with their eldest son. By the time the police officer arrived, the younger boy was dead, burnt to death in the living room. The officer said he must have set the toaster and went into the living room to watch TV and wait for his older brother to wake up and join him. The officer said that the window nearby had collapsed from the heat and melted around the little boy. The cop said he had 2 boys about their age at the time, said he needed to excuse himself from the scene, and went into his squad car and couldn't stop crying and shaking. As the cop told the story in class, he started crying again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Much love to all police officers out there who make the world a safer place. And I'm sorry for the horrors that you guys have to endure. Just a reminder that I have launched my merch store, so if you'd like some unique and limited edition pieces of Mortis Media merchandise, get your hands on a t-shirt quickly, as stocks won't last forever. Remember that if you enjoyed today's video, please consider dropping a like and leaving a comment, as it would really help support the channel and I really appreciate it. And if you'd like to do something incredible to help support the channel even further, feel free to visit my Patreon. You can find the link in the description, as well as the links to my social media. But if you want your story read on my channel, you can submit it as a text post to Reddit, or send it to me via email. Both links can of course be found in the description. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.